Um, Hi, my name is Nikki Bentley Coulthart. I am a grant writer with the Grant Advantage. I am located in Buchanan, West Virginia, so I'm kind of in the north central region, and have been writing grants for about 30 years now in West Virginia in various capacities. So I'm here today to talk a little bit about navigating federal grant application process, looking at grants.gov, sam.gov, login.gov, kind of understanding the federal regulations. I'm sure that some of what I speak about you already know, and that's okay. There'll be some things that you don't, and some things other people know that you didn't, and back and forth. So we'll all just share what we have. We have a pretty small group. I'm very informal. So if you have a question, you can either write it in the chat and Jenna will shout it out to me, or you can unmute and turn your camera on so I can see that you're there and just ask a question. That sound all right? Okay. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is just the grants.gov system. Now all federal grant funding is listed in grants.gov, and most you apply for the funding through grants.gov. To search for funding, if you just want to see what's out there, you don't have to register. You can just hop on, hit the search bar, and go to town. However, if you want to apply for grants, you need to set up your organization as an applicant and manage users of that organization. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. The first step, however, is not going to grants.gov. It's going to sam.gov. And that is the system for award management for the federal government. This is basically how you can get money if you get a grant, how the money gets funneled through, and they need some information to make sure that you are a legitimate organization before they can award you a grant. Okay. So in order to apply for sam.gov, you'll need some information. You'll need your organizational information, the address, the officers, the phone number, email address, website, that kind of thing. Information on the organizational leadership, banking information. They'll ask you what banking information you want checks deposited into. Some tax information, maybe your 501c3 if you're a nonprofit, or other tax documents. And you need to designate an e-business point of contact, or an e-biz EOC. And this e-business point of contact is the person who will have authorization to set up other accounts on behalf of the organization. And those accounts include your login.gov and your grants.gov. So some organizations set up a e-biz contact and an alternative in case somebody's out of the office and something needs to be done. Others just make it one person. It's executive director, it's the board chair, whoever has that authority in your organization. When you look at this, you can see a little green. I don't know, can you see my mouse when I move it? Anybody? There's a little green button here, which is how you get registered. That's where you start. You start there. It's going to ask you a whole bunch of questions. And you just, as long as you have that information on hand, you'll be able just to fill it out pretty quickly and get your information in. It asks you what type of business you are. So you may have, depending on the size of your organization, you may have to go back to your articles of incorporation, or maybe your business license, or wherever the nonprofit was set up, or a board member may have the codes that relate to it. If you don't have it, make your best guess. You can always go back and change it later. But you want to get into this system so that you can apply for grants. SAMS.gov takes 7 to 10 days to get your registration approved. So don't wait till the last minute. I would do this way before you're ready to apply for a grant, just so you have it in the system and you can work out any bugs that might happen during the registration process. Sometimes they'll send you emails back and ask for more information. Sometimes they want a signed letter that says, yes, you're authorized. The authorized person is authorized to do this by the board. Sometimes I don't know. There's just different things over the years I've been asked for. So it changes based on what the new rules are. So I can't tell you exactly what it's going to be, but that's how you set it up. So you just have to start there. 7 to 10 days. And then at the end of that, you'll get your unique entity identifying number, or your UEI. We used to work on DUNS numbers, if anybody's familiar with that. Everybody had to have a DUNS number, or a T-pin and an M-pin and all these other numbers that you needed to apply for assistance. Now everybody has to have this unique entity identifying number. Now, if you already have an account in SAMS.gov, they've already assigned you a number and you can just go to your account and find it. If you haven't applied, then when you get through the process, it'll allow you to do that. I want to back up a second and just let you know that I do not work for SAMS.gov, Grants.gov, Login.gov. I do not work for the federal agency that provides WCAP funding. I just have been writing grants, and these are my experiences through the process. So if you, like they say on TV, I'm not a doctor, don't take my advice, but this is how I do it. That's kind of where I'm at. If you have questions, there are phone numbers on all of these websites where you can call, or emails, and they will get back to you. SAMS.gov takes a while. Don't give up. It can take them 7 to 10 days to respond. So that's why you don't want to wait till the last minute. But after you go through, I can't show you the whole registration without registering. So you just have to trust me on this one, that once you hit this green button, it just starts asking questions. And you answer the questions, you can save and come back later if you need to gather more info, or double check on an account number, or get a copy of a document. You can save where you're at and come back. And then after you're registered, you have to update it, I think, once a year to make sure that your information is still accurate. That process takes 5 minutes if nothing's changed, but you do have to stay on that, and every year make updates. So if you have, I had a question from somebody earlier in the week. If you have a SAM account, however, your eBiz point of contact is no longer with the organization, you can email them and ask for a technical assistance help. Just email and explain the situation and say that you would like to speak to a representative to help walk you through the process. If you just say, "What do I do?" you're going to get back some random kind of statement. But if you say, "I would like to speak to a representative," someone will call you back, and they can walk you through the process of, because you have to verify that it is your organization and that you have the right documents before they can assign a new eBiz point of contact. That's to protect the nonprofits themselves. Okay, I'm gonna just open questions right here on SAMS.gov. Did anybody come with a specific SAMS.gov question, or has thought of some as we've been talking?
Hi, this is Emily. I have one. Someone basically earlier in my organization had set up an agreement for a third party to renew our SAM registration each year. It costs a lot of money, and I'm not convinced it's worth anything much. And I'd like to know your opinion on that. I think you said it takes 5 minutes.
Yeah, in my humble opinion, if not a lot is changing, if all that you're updating is like your annual budget numbers maybe, or if you've had an audit, sometimes they ask for new audit dates, things like that. If that's all that you're updating, you can easily do that in-house. If there's been some major changes, it might be helpful to have somebody to help you. But for the most part, I think it's easy enough to do in-house.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Questions on SAMS.gov?
Our representative passed away, and so I have no idea really what the status is. I don't know if we were signed up for the SAMs. So I guess how would I find out if we have a SAMs account?
If you go onto the SAMS.gov website,
Okay.
there is a search for entity option. I'm going to try and zoom in on this real quick so I can see what it says. Um, check entity status. There's the dark green button, the light green button, and then another white button there. And I believe when you click that, you can select by organization name and then search to see if you're in there. And if not, I would go ahead and just start a new application process, and it'll let you know if you're already in the system. And then you can, and if it won't let you go farther because you don't have the eBiz contact, then I would reach out to their helpline and they'll walk you through it. There are people paid there. That's their whole job, is just to help people fill out these forms. So that's what it's not simple, but it's a little time consuming to get set up to begin with. But once you're set up, it's easy to update.
So the DUNS number is no longer needed.
Right. Oh, if you have your DUNS, when you call for assistance, they can help. It'll help them track your record faster.
Yeah. Okay.
But for Grants.gov, they no longer want your DUNS number. They want this UEI number. And it's a bunch. It makes no sense. It's a long. I think it's like 12 characters of numbers and letters mixed together that are just it's a unique number, I guess, that's hard to duplicate or
the password.
But if you have your prior DUNS and MPIN and all that stuff, that'll make the process faster to find your registration. If you don't, that's okay too. It happens all the time where somebody has left an organization, a new person comes in and doesn't have any records. You know, they have to figure it out. So just reach out to them if you can't get past the process at the beginning. You don't need the UEI to register for SAM. You just need your tax ID numbers and things like that. SAM will generate that UEI for you for the other systems. Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions on the SAM part? I'll go into a little more detail on Grants.gov because that system will let me in without having to recreate a whole new process. So, I do also want to point out that for Grants.gov, they have the website, which is literally grants.gov, or they have a mobile app that you can use. I would recommend registering on the website before you try the app. But once you get registered, you can sign in on the app and then you have access to search and look for things. I would also not recommend applying through the app. I would try and apply through a website, just because there's still a lot of glitches that haven't been worked out there. Okay, so let's say you've completed your SAM.gov registration. It's been more than 10 days. You have your UEI number. You know who your eBiz point of contact is, and you're ready to go to the next step. So you have to return to the Grants.gov website. There's no fee to register for either of these. And the eBiz point of contact must create an account with an email address that was used in SAM.gov. So it needs to be the same email address as SAM.gov that you use in Grants.gov. It will add your profile, and you have to enter the UEI number that you got to verify that that is the same organization. In the process of applying for Grants.gov, it'll also ask you to sign up for Login.gov. And their logo looks like this little red shield with a keyhole in it. That is kind of a security measure they've added in the last year or so. I make sure it should be the same username and password for all three of these systems. So once you sign in for SAMS.gov, you can create your login.gov to be the same username and password, and then it just lets you into the different systems all at the same time. You do periodically have to update those passwords. So if you haven't been in your SAMS account for a while or Grants.gov, it will ask you to update your email. If you have a new email address or it's a new staff member, the eBiz point of contact can go back in and reauthorize user access to any of these systems. So it's important to know who that person is. And an alternative if you have them. Okay, so when you're going in to register for Grants.gov for the first time, there are very detailed instructions that you can find on the website. It is posted here, and I am going to send a copy of these out after the session today, so you'll have these links with you. And as I said earlier, the eBiz point of contact has to be the first person to set up an account in the system. Then each individual can set up just a regular Grants.gov account and ask for permission to be affiliated with the organization. And then the eBiz point of contact approves it. And then they can set up the roles of who's allowed to submit, who can enter information but not hit the submit button, who has approvals over, they can set all those different rules. Excuse me, once everybody gets registered. If you have someone working for your organization and they leave, the eBiz point of contact can take them out of the system just as easily. It's just some checkboxes, so it's pretty easy once you get in. All right, so this is what you're going to find when you go to the website I mentioned here. It's going to give you some information at the top about sam.gov, about login.gov. You'll have some of the same information we've already gone through. And then at the very bottom of the page, which I have missed several times, but at the very bottom of the page, it's going to say begin Grants.gov registration. All of this can be found under the applicant tab, which I did not include a screenshot of, but the applicant tab in Grants.gov. At the top of the page, there's several different tabs across the top. Applicant is where you start when you're going to register. Scroll to the bottom of that page, and that's where you'll click to register. It's kind of hard to find because it doesn't show up right away on the first view you see. All right, and then it takes you to this page. There is a nice video that does explain how to register as an individual and your organization. This will take you to a YouTube. They walk you through it. You can pause it. You can go back and rewind it. You can follow up. It is a good tool to use to help you get registered. You'll notice here on the left that there are two sections here. There's applicants and grantors. Grantors are the people with the money that are giving it out, and the applicants are us. So you're going to want to get into the applicant section. And when you hit this button, it automatically takes you there. This link here where it says applicant registration page takes you back where you can get more information on the process there as well. I do believe once you get into this YouTube video, there's some other videos that you can link to from there, but I didn't copy them on this because this one's pretty good to get you started. All right, then this is what the registration looks like. It's very simple. They want your name, first name, last name, email address, primary phone number is a requirement. If it has a little red star next to it, if I zoom in here a little bit, can you see that these have little red stars? And those are required. You have to complete those to move forward. The others you can leave blank. If you don't want to put a middle initial, you don't want to give them a mobile phone number, you can just leave those blank. That's fine. And then you'll set up your username and password and confirm your password. If you are the eBiz point of contact, I just make all those the same as much as possible so I don't have to keep remembering them. But that is my personal preference, not necessarily recommended best practices. But I can't remember. I'm too old. I can't remember too many passwords. So that's what I do. Before you hit continue and submit, it gives you the option to get alerts from Grants.gov and the newsletter. Sometimes I find really good information in these, but I do write grants for a living and I'm on here all the time. It may not be applicable to everybody. If you do select that you want them, you can go back later and unclick them and have them quit coming to you. Or you can unclick here and add them later. It's pretty user-friendly. Then you should pretty much, maybe at this point, you should be getting, it'll ask you, the next page asks you about what organizations that you are affiliated with, and then it'll take you from there, step by step. I'm not going to go through all the boxes because you guys are able to fill in boxes. You'll get an email confirmation that you need to confirm, and that's about it on the registration part. So before we get into using Grants.gov, let's talk about registration. Anybody have questions or concerns, thoughts, problems you've had?
No.
Okay, it's a much simpler process than the SAM.gov. Because once you get in, it's just answering the questions and it'll link.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you map what you've just gone through onto the older system where there used to be a T pin and an M pin?
If you have an older system, you should still be able to go in. You may just need to replace you may just say, I've forgotten my password. And then it will allow you in, and then you just update what needs updated. It might ask for your UEI. It may ask for things. I would try that first. If it doesn't let you in after you update your password, then create a new account, and it will tell you that you're in there, and it'll find you.
Okay, thanks.
So it should connect you. If it doesn't, then I would call the helpline. Grants.gov's help is much faster than SAM.gov. And the Grants.gov, you can get this done in a day, and then you're registered and ready to go. All right. Because really the only thing that changed in Grants.gov is being linked to that UEI number. And so that's the rest of it is very similar to how it's always been. Okay, but if there's anybody here who's never used Grants.gov, I'm going to give a quick tutorial on how to use it. There are some really good search engines. If you always apply for the same funding all the time, then it's worth your time to go in and look and see what else is out there that might be applicable to what you're doing. There's some basic windows. Now, all of these show up in one column on the side of the Grants.gov page. I've broken them up here just so they fit on the page, but these are all in one long line on the left-hand side. So you can go to basic search and you can try keywords. If you know the opportunity number, you've seen that somebody else got this grant and you have the ID number, you can put it in there. Or a CFDA number, which is the Catalog of Federal Domestic Assistance number, which is where it came out of the regulations. But keywords is where I normally start. Oops, getting too excited here. And I try different kinds of keywords. So if I'm working with an elementary school and we're trying to find money that helps with physical activity, I might start off with elementary school and see what shows up. Then I might try physical education. Then I might try healthy kids. I try a few different keywords because what it searches for is the title of that grant. Sorry, allergies are bad today. The title of that grant. So the federal government is really fond of using acronyms for programs, and sometimes those acronyms show up as a keyword search, and sometimes you have to spell it out. So just play around with that to see what's going on. The next set of boxes are what is the current status of that funding? Is it forecasted to come out? Is it not currently open, but we think it's going to come out soon, so it's been forecasted? Has it already been posted? Is it live? Has it been closed? Is it a grant that was issued before and it's closed out now? That's where you can find the WCAP at the moment. It's closed because it was out. I guess the deadline was October, right? If I'm correct. So it's been closed, but it's still, the information is still on there. It just is under the closed section. Has it been archived? Is it older than that? And it's been archived. They've got 63,000 sets of Grants.gov data archived on the system. There's different types of funding award. A cooperative agreement is when the government has an idea of what they want to see happen. They want to work with organizations to carry it out the way they want to see it done. And so they're going to work with people to reach these goals. Grants are, we have an idea, we want to see how it's going to work. We're going to let the applicants tell us how they're going to do it, and we'll decide if we like it or not. And if we like it, then we'll accept the proposal. Then there's procurement contracts, which are we need something built or something done, and we just want to know how much it's going to cost. So therefore, they send out basically requests for bids. So there's different types of funding. The cooperative agreement is what the Watershed Cooperative Agreement Program is. It's in the title. So it just means that there's a little more input from the government on how the activities are carried out versus a grant where you would define the scope of work and say, this is what I'm going to do to reach your goal. The next box is on eligibilities. You can look for, all kinds of different categories, schools, towns, individuals. There's not very many individuals, but for-profit organizations, things like that. And then the categories are broad, brushed subjects like ag, arts, business and commerce, community and development. And then the next one is the agency. So if you know which agency you're looking for funding, you can search by any of those. Generally, on my first search, I click all the agencies, all the categories, all the eligibilities, and start with a keyword. Then if I find that I've got 2,000 search results, then I'll start narrowing it down to what I think is most likely to be a good fit for what I'm looking for. Let's see. So once you find your search items and you put them up, they're going to show up on the screen like this. It got cut off here, but on this side is all those check boxes we were talking about. But here where this blue arrow is, it's going to show you what grants are available at this time. And here it tells you if they're forecasted or posted. It means they're currently active and open for submission, or closed, or whatever boxes you've clicked. It'll show you here. And then to get to the information, you're going to click on the blue link, which is under the opportunity number. There's the hyperlink. This will show you when the information was posted, and then it shows you the close date. And usually the close date is the deadline, but in some circumstances it's not. So, but usually that tells you when the grant's going to be due. So when I'm looking for grant funding, I know that I'm not going to get a chance to work on this for another month. I'm going to kind of skim through and skip the ones that are going to close out before that time period. Okay, so let's talk about searches. Have most people already done searches? Is this just kind of a refresher? Is there anything in particular you'd like to know, or questions about ideas for keyword searches or anything like that?
Yeah, I have a question about your last slide. Well, it's the same slide, I guess. Can you sort this list? So if I want to know stuff that's posted already, don't care about what's forecast or anything. And then you might have a second category like opportunity number or something like that. Is it like that you can search that way?
You have two options. You can go back to these, the check boxes, which I said are on the side, and then just unclick forecasted. Those will go away. All right. So that's a quick, easy way to do that. You can also click on these headers, like where it says agency, and you click that, and it'll sort by that column, or by close date. It'll sort by that column. It also gives you the option up here where by the save search button, it says export detailed data. It will allow you to export the sheet to Excel, so you can sort it yourself however you're used to working in Excel. And then you can go back in because you'll have the opportunity number. I don't think it allows you to click from there into the program, but it does allow you to sort and narrow it a little bit better for you, however you're most comfortable doing your searches.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And I'll often search by agency, especially if I'm working on something that's like a community development project. A lot of times we end up with a lot of stuff that's designed for Africa or for Haiti or somebody that we're trying to help out. And to weed those out, I'll get rid of the USAID or State Department grants. I'll just, close those out and then I don't see them. Or I will just search by close date and pay attention to what's there. The search engine's pretty good. If you can think about it, you can usually find something. When you get too many lists, then you got to kind of start narrowing it down with adding a keyword to it, or maybe looking at who the category is that it serves. Or you can once you play with it a little bit, you can narrow down your search, because it is kind of overwhelming the first time you go in. And if you put water, you're going to get lots and lots and lots and lots. Everything from research on water and space to nutritional value of water for infants, to waterways and ocean, I don't know, maritime stuff. So you just have to kind of narrow it down and think a little narrower of what you're looking for. And it's a lot of fun sometimes. I know I do this for a living, so I have time. Everybody else has got a project and they're working and they're busy. So I know you don't have time, but I like to go through and just see what kind of crazy, weird stuff the government's funding. It's always fun to see some of the things that are popping up that are coming out of our legislation. So one more point is the money that's available through this portal is all our tax dollars. It's all funding that has gone into the federal budget, which then Congress votes on annually on our annual budget. And then the budget gives each agency a certain amount of money that they're allowed to use and a certain amount of criteria that they're supposed to meet. Then those agencies take that funding and break it down into different projects and send it out in the form of grants, cooperative agreements, purchase orders, to get that work done. And so that's where this funding comes from. So if you have a grant from the federal government and you're having problems with something, or you're having, you think you might need a budget revision, or you've hit a hiccup and you might need a little bit of a time extension, talk to the program officers about that, because they do not want to go back to Congress and say, no, we didn't need your money. They want to make the projects work. They want to reach their goals, and you're helping them reach their goals and spend their budget down. So they'll work with you. So don't ever be afraid to call your program officers on a grant. I'm sure whatever situation you are in, they've heard before, and probably a whole lot worse. So don't, keep that communication going. After you get a grant, it really makes a difference, especially in future funding. Okay, so now we've decided, we found the Watershed Cooperative Agreement Program, and that's what we want to apply for. This one, I don't know if this is the exact same one. It's an acid mine drainage program. It's closed, but it was available this time last year. So once you click on that hyperlink, it'll take you to a page that looks like this. It'll give you 4 tabs across the center here. There's a synopsis, a version history, related documents, and package. I'm going to go through each one of these, just kind of show you what's available and what's there. Under the synopsis page, you're going to get just that, a synopsis. It's going to talk about what's the title of the program, category of funding, the CFDA number that we talked about earlier. Does it require any cost sharing or matching funds? This one does not. It's going to talk about when was it posted, when are the due dates. And if you notice on this one, there's an original closing date that was September 20th, 2022, and then the current closing date, which was October 21st. So it was extended a little bit. So it's important to kind of pay attention to this as you go through. Then at the bottom, it'll tell you what the estimated funding is. That's for everybody. When it says total estimated program funding, that is all across the country. So across the country, they had 1.5 million. And the award ceiling is the most any individual grantee can apply for. So that's $100,000 in this case. And the minimum you can apply for is $1. Some grants will say, we don't think you can carry out this project unless you spend at least $50,000. And we think some places it could cost up to $200,000. So you might see a range that has a minimum. It just depends on the program. And then if you scroll on down on this page, you'll see a little more information. the eligibility, who's eligible to apply, and any other regulatory statements that are in those eligibility rules will be stated there. And then usually there's a link to some grant guidelines that you can click, and that's where the second arrow is, saying see related documents. And if you click on that, it'll take you to some other documents that you may need to complete the grant. There's also a contact person name. Sometimes it's just an email, sometimes it's a phone number, sometimes it's only an address. But at least you have a name to look up on the agency website if you have questions. The person whose name shows up here, that's their job, answer questions. So don't be afraid to call them and ask them. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get moved up the funding ranks just because you called and asked, but it can't hurt to rule out a problem before you get there by just calling and asking a couple questions. That's one of the things I see very common with nonprofits is kind of a I don't want to sound stupid, or I don't want to sound like, we're just a small group from West Virginia. I don't want to sound like we're, not as important as some of the larger groups they're working with. They don't care. They want to know who you are, what's going on. It's their job to help people get grants and help them walk through the process. So they'll answer your questions. They'll guide you. They might say, this grant isn't really a good fit for you, but we have this other funding available that fits exactly what you're talking about. So don't be afraid to call and ask. I found that to be very helpful. All right, so that's all that you see on the first tab. Like I said, there's lots of little links you can click and go on to other documents. When you go back to that first page, the second tab is a version history. And as you can see here, this particular one is on version synopsis number 4, meaning they've made some kind of change in the guidelines. So if you had printed out the guidelines the first day this came out, there may be some changes, such as the deadline being extended. How do you know if they're making changes? Well, they've offered this nice little red button up here called subscribe. You can go in, hit subscribe, and that will subscribe you to just this particular funding source. And if any updates are made, you'll get an email that says, hey, there's been a change to this program. Please go to Grants.gov to check the update. And that will keep you from missing out on, sometimes there'll be a form that's not working right in the system, and they'll update the form. And that doesn't happen as much as it used to. When Grants.gov was fairly new, it was always happening. But every once in a while, you'll see that there's a problem with the form, or a PDF file isn't working and they've replaced it. And so the update that'll tell you that there's been a change. So I always suggest, if I'm applying for a grant, to hit that subscribe button so you know what's going on. All right, then the next one is related documents. This is where you find the actual grant guidelines. An FOA, an RFP, an NOFA, an RFA, they're all the same things that mean grant guidelines. Every agency has their own acronyms for funding opportunity applications, or notice of funding available, notice of funding opportunities, request for proposals, request for application. They all mean the same thing, grant guidelines. And these are usually found under the related documents. Usually they offer you a zip file and a regular file. And sometimes there's multiple files within that zip, and they'll all show up here. And I did click to this, so we'll hop over to that in a few minutes, and we'll look at what that one is for this particular grant. All right, then the last one is the package button. And you can see I've switched to a different grant on this, because since the other one was closed, it didn't give me these options. So I pulled one that was currently active. When you click the package, it's going to give you 2 options. You can preview the forms that are going to be required, or you can go ahead and hit apply. And when you hit apply, then it'll give you the full access to the workbook that you need, or the workspace that you need to update things. Let's see, I think I pulled, yeah. And these are samples. This is from preview look of all the different forms that they request that you fill out in Grants.gov. This is all in addition to the narrative you're going to write and the budget narrative you're going to propose or whatever they ask for. This is just the forms in Grants.gov that you need to fill out. Each grant is slightly different and will ask for different amounts of information. But these are some of the standard ones. The application for federal assistance, or you'll often hear people say SF 424, which is standard form number 424. That's going to have your basic information about the organization, where you're located, who's authorized to submit this proposal, how much money you're asking for, just kind of a cover sheet that goes on all grants. There's some assurances that go into the program, and those are the forms that back in the old day you'd print out and your executive director had to sign off that, yep, we're not delinquent on any debts, we're not going to use this money for lobbying, we're not going to, if we build a building that's going to comply with all the federal regs, there's just a whole bunch of regulations on that form. And by hitting submit, sorry, loud car going by hitting submit in grants.gov, you sign that. So you don't have to print it out anymore and sign it. Whoever the authorized organizational rep is in grants.gov or your eBiz person, they sign it by hitting submit. But it's good to read and just make sure that you know what's in there so that you're aware of what regulations you're expected to follow. There's a budget form. If the project, depending on the project, sometimes it's an SF424B and sometimes it's an SF424C. One is a project that allows construction. One is for a project that does not allow construction. So you can see when you get in there that you have the right form. And that is simply budget numbers. There are instructions included at the top of the form, as well as in, when you're on the page, there's other buttons you can click that'll give you some help and guidance. The budget forms are somewhat confusing because they want to see your first year laid out, and then they ask you the same information again, but they want it over multiple years if it's a multiple year grant. And then they want to see how much money you need each quarter. It's really just, it's a lot of redundancy, but you need to make sure that your numbers match from top to bottom, because that can cause some errors when you go to submit. All right, budget narrative attachment form. This is just a form that you attach a PDF to, where you've written out your budget narrative explaining how you came up with your budget numbers, and then you convert that to a PDF to upload it. There are free programs to do that. There's expensive programs that'll do that, and then there's some moderately priced programs that will help you convert things. So it just depends on what you operate with. Key contacts, those are the people who are key to the success of the program. A project director, maybe a new hire, maybe a community partner, those key people that are involved and who the federal agency may need to contact about the grant if they have a question. Project performance sites, that often it's basically where are you located and which congressional district are you in. That way they send notices to the senators that, yep, we received a proposal from your community, and just to let you know. It doesn't really have any bearing. Another piece of advice, a lot of people feel that in order to submit a grant, you have to spend a lot of time trying to get letters from your senators and your representatives. I've never had a letter from my senator or representative make a difference of whether I get a grant or not. Unless that particular senator is on the committee that will make decisions about the funding for that program. Other than that, spend your time on getting local community partnership letters. Don't waste your time chasing all those other letters. The lobbying form, unless you pay for a lobbyist to represent you at the state or federal level, usually those are all just not applicables. Then there's a place to attach your narrative, project abstract, just a one-page summary of what you're doing, which is the first thing they'll read. So even though it's probably the last thing you write, please make sure that it's somewhat coherent and sets the stage and gets the reader engaged so that they'll read your proposal. And then other attachments if they ask for something. So that's pretty much the basic forms. I'm gonna stop here for questions. any prior experience with Grants.gov and hiccups with forms, questions, things you don't, you got stumped on, you want to talk about, anything like that? Okay, again, yeah, it's pretty much just forms, filling them out. It's time consuming. You need to probably allow yourself to sit down and do this all in one day. That's probably 4 to 6 hours of just filling out forms. And I do it all the time. So if you're not familiar and don't have the information ready, it might take a little bit longer. So I kind of do it over the course of the time period while I'm working on stuff. As I finish my budget, I go ahead and upload it. As I'm finishing this, I go ahead and do it. And then I go back to writing. And then I match them up. Okay, now you have probably seen this if you have ever worked in grants.gov at all. You download a file and you get this error message that says the document you are trying to load requires Adobe Reader 8 or higher, and blah, blah, blah. It goes on for a while. And it tells you how to install a new reader. And so you go about the process and you install a new reader and your computer tells you, well, that's the version you have. You don't need an update. And this is a glitch. This is a problem with grants.gov. There is a workaround. What you can do is download the file and just save it to your download files or wherever you save your files. And then go ahead and open up your Adobe program and then search for the file to open it from the folder. Then it will open up and you can see all the information. It's not a corrupt file. It's not something wrong with your computer. It's just a glitch that happens quite frequently with grants.gov. So that's the workaround we found that works when it doesn't automatically open up. A lot of the forms you don't have to download. You can just fill them out online and you never have to download them. Others, if you want to, you can work on them offline and then upload them again once you're done. Just depends on your preference. Okay, so after you've gone into grants.gov, you found what you're looking for, you know which grant you want to write, then these are just some tips of mine for taking the next step and getting ready to write. You definitely want to read the entire document, right? Our tendency is to go and say, okay, what do I have to write? Let's go to that section and just skip to that. But if you read the entire document, you can get a feel for what they're looking for, what the I'd say mood, but what the mood of the agency is, what sounds important, what do they mention 3 or 4 times, what are the things that they're really stressing throughout the whole document to help you make sure that what you submit meets their needs. Because the truth of the matter is, they don't care what meets your needs. They care if you meet their needs because they've got the money. You want to note the deadlines, the method of submission, and any preferences or priorities that are listed. Sometimes grants will have preference points and priority points. And you might think, oh, that's not important. That's just a preference. It doesn't matter. But sometimes the difference between getting funded and not getting funded is, I've had a grant, the difference between funding and not was 0.3 of a point. So every point counts when you're doing something competitive. So I would make sure to look at those. Then you want to review the selection criteria and point values. So you know kind of what they're looking for. Again, if a section is only worth 5 points, don't dismiss it because those 5 points can make a difference between getting funded and not. I recommend making a checklist of all the required attachments. And I'll tell you why. I don't know, about 10 years ago now, I was working for college and we were working on a Department of Education grant. It was a huge grant. We had worked on it for months, laying the groundwork down, having all kinds of committee meetings, bringing all kinds of partners together. The narrative itself was 50 pages. And by the time you attached all the attachments, this thing was like an 80-page document. And we sent it in and it came back unread because we missed one form. There was a required form we didn't attach, and they kicked it back and didn't even read it. So I have a copy of that form, and I look at it every day to remind myself, make a checklist. Just double check it one more time, make sure everything's in there, because that's the last thing you want to do is have a fantastic project, everything lined up, ready to get the money, and then it doesn't get reviewed. So checklists are important. And I haven't done that since, I'll tell you. So after you've read the guidelines, you know what they're talking about, you know where they're going, start gathering all the information you'll need and start writing. I recommend if it asks for letters of support, start those right away. Come up with some kind of little blurb you can put in a letter, get it sent out to the people that you need to sign it. If you have to have an MOU, start that right away. Anything that needs is reliant on other people to do, start that right away. If you need to request information, data from somebody, if you need a lab result, or you need a demographic number, or you need an assessment, property assessed or something, start that right away. Get anything that depends on somebody else rolling, so that you can then focus on what you need to do to prepare the proposal and get ready to go. Okay. All right. The next part I have the guidelines from the last WCAP cycle that we can walk through and just kind of talk about what we think they're looking for. Again, I don't work for them. This is just from my experience writing grants, how I would approach it. Is that something that would be helpful, or do we want to go back to the Grants.gov and walk through some submissions or walk through some enrollments? What do you guys want the most? What would be most helpful?
Well, this is all pretty new to me, so hard for me to say what might be more or less. So
Okay.
It's all good for me.
Okay, then I'm going to swap over here to my other PowerPoint. Did that one switch? Can you see what I'm looking at now?
No.
Let me have to, okay, I'm gonna stop sharing and reshare. Okay. All right. So when I went into grants.gov and I clicked the give me information about this program. Sorry, my cats are going crazy over here. It gave me the guidelines from the proposal. And so I just turned them into a PowerPoint so we could flip through it real quick and see what kind of what an average federal grant guidelines looks like. Generally, there's a table of contents. In most cases, they will be clickable, and you can go from one thing to the next from here. If you wanted to see what's the award amount, you can click it and it'll take you right to it. Etc. So then all federal grants will give you a program description. They all use the same kind of format when they submit their guidelines. I like to highlight the purpose and the requirements, and I will use that exact language in my grant proposal. So the purpose of my proposal is the purpose of this grant in West Virginia, or in Upshur County, or in the Mid-Atlantic region, whatever the scope is. I will take their wording and put it back in the proposal. So in this case, let's see. The Watershed Cooperative Agreement is designed to be partnered with other funding sources. Okay. Funding is available to assist local nonprofit organizations and groups that undertake acid mine drainage reclamation projects. I'm not sure if this is the same grant. Looked like there were two grants. I'm not sure if this is the same one that you guys were looking at, but we're going to stick with this for now. Funding priorities and technical focus are here it is, to restore streams affected by acid mine drainage to a level that will support a diverse biological community and provide recreational opportunities for the public. So I would can't highlight it because I'm in PowerPoint, but I would highlight that, cut that sentence out, copy it, put it in my Word document that I'm working on. And that's going to be my purpose for this grant. That's going to be my overall goal. When we talk about goals, that's going to be my overall vision of where we're going to go. I would use their language and put it back. Then it goes on to say that you can only use the funding related to, I don't know what that stands for. Someone else probably knows. Oh, Surface Mine Control and Reclamation Act defined abandoned coal mining activities processes, which include remediation. So then, you know, it goes through all this. You can see if those apply to you, I would use that. If not, because it says may. Another trick in federal grant language, if it says must or shall, you have to do it to get the full points. If it says may or can, it's optional. Okay. But if it says must, if it says shall, then you need to include it in your proposal that you will do it. Okay. The next section is usually how much money is available. Like we said earlier, there's 1.3 million available nationwide, maximum and minimum amount of awards. And they all say this, so don't freak out when you say it. It's contingent upon the availability of appropriations. Because what happens is a lot of the funding guidelines get sent out before the budget is finally approved and signed. So there's always that chance that something at the federal, you know, the Congress can, you know, have a change of heart right before they sign the bill for the budget and take money out of one and move it into another category. COVID could hit, something like that, and could change the availability of funding. 99.9% of the times the money's going to be there, the proposal is going to go through, and it'll impact the next fiscal year, whatever changes occurred. But every once in a while, there could be something that happens, so they have to put that language in here. The anticipated award date. This is helpful for planning and budgeting to know when they think the money's going to start. Looks like they thought this program would be awarded by January of this year. So that the deadline was the end of October. So that gave them November and December to do the review, and then they would announce it in January. Now, my experience is sometimes it's closer to 6 months by the time they get everything awarded. But I would use whatever date they put in here. That's where I would start my budget year with. And I would start my planning process of that date. They expect to give out 13 awards nationwide. Possibly, cooperatives, I don't know. Then it says 20. I wouldn't know what that meant. I would probably have to call and ask, or I would just assume as long as I stay within that budget line item, I'd be okay. All right, and then they talk about it's being a cooperative agreement, stuff we've already talked about. Eligible applicants, again, those were things that were found on Grants.gov, but they have to put it in here too. Does it require cost sharing or matching? What cost sharing and matching is, some federal grants say, for every dollar we give you, you have to put some money in from a non-federal source. So they may want to know that the property is already owned by you and the value of what's going to happen is not going to be a charge to the federal government. So there's some value to that. Could be the staff time that's involved is a match. Could be that you have other cash from the city or the county that's going to help with the project. So that would be matching funds. Once you match $1 to a federal source, you can't use it again to match to another federal source. So it's not in your best interest to match as much as you can, but only match what's required. Maybe a little bit more if you have it and it's not going to be used somewhere else. But it doesn't give you bonus points to match a whole lot of extra when it doesn't ask for it. So if it doesn't ask for cost sharing or matching, I don't put any in. It doesn't help on the review because there's no points valued for cost sharing in a project like this. Okay, let's see. And this is all just what they expect of applicants, and you can read through that and see what it talks a little bit about what the agency has to do. That's not as important. But now we're getting into what you have to actually submit. Everything has to go through Grants.gov. It says here under D1. And then it starts talking about some of those forms we discussed, the SF 424, standard form 424. And it tells you need to fill that out. And then you have to develop a project narrative. And that's what we normally think of when we say grant. What we write, the part that we write. That's the project narrative. This one asks for 2 main documents. A technical proposal, which is no more than 15 pages, and it should describe in depth the scope of the proposal, its goals, methods, schedule, personnel working on the project, their qualifications, and instructional capabilities of the applicant. So that's just a little summary of what they're going to look for in that. Then they also talk about an abstract, which is usually a 1-page. This is a summary, and they tell you what they want you to say, the project title, objectives, that kind of thing to go in there. You need to provide a description of the problems proposed to be solved, such as, I don't know. I don't know enough about acid mine drainage to know what the problem is, but I assume it's bad and we want to prevent it and we want to clean up if we can, and that's what we're going to do. But you guys know the information and know the data. This is where you use your expertise to show what's local, what's going on in your community, and how you're going to fix it. And then the qualifications and experience of those key personnel. Again, you don't have to list everybody that's going to touch this project, but anybody that's key to making it successful. So that could be a project leader, that could be a consultant that you're going to have to bring in, that could be students, if you're going to have students working on workforce development type of project, those kind of things. And that's all they're really asking for on the narrative. And then they get into the budget. And they say you need to fill out the budget form, and here's what we want to see in a budget narrative. So they explain that to you. All right. Indirect cost rates. Is anybody familiar with what that means?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Okay. Yeah, so indirect costs are either a negotiated rate with the federal government that says when you do a grant, there's other costs that it costs to carry out that grant that aren't necessarily easily allocated to one category or another. It's not necessarily just personnel because, bookkeeping doesn't only work on this grant. They work across all grants and all programs. So trying to figure out what percentage of their time goes on this grant is kind of challenging. And audit. Those are things that aren't necessarily easy to attribute to just one project. Utilities for the building you're in. Lawn care for the facilities or whatever. Those kind of costs are not necessarily directly related to this one grant, but they're essential in order to carry out the program. If you have a federally negotiated rate, good for you. Use that number. It's probably going to be a higher percentage. If you don't, the federal government has made it easier so that you don't have to go through that process, and you can request a flat 10% rate of what are called modified total direct costs. I could do an entire 2 hours on this section, but just know that if you have board members that are saying we need an indirect cost rate, we need an indirect cost rate, look at it and see if you really do, or if this de minimis rate helps. It's 10% of your direct cost. So if you're asking for $100,000, you can ask for approximately 10,000 in indirect costs, which basically are overhead costs that can be used to pay for facilities, administration, costs related to doing the business.
That's not in addition to the 100,000 limit, is it?
No, unless the grant says on top it is within that dollar amount that you're asking for. So it ends up being, 90 when you break it backwards, it's 10% of the direct costs before you take out the indirect. So you would end up with 9,000 something.
Yeah, right. Okay.
But yeah. Some grants will allow you to go above and beyond, but most are, if there's a cap of funding, the maximum amount you can ask for is 100,000. Your indirect is included within that 100,000. On your budget, if you have any conflict of interest, they'll ask you to disclose it. That could be a situation in which, let's say you're going to buy a piece of property to, along the watershed that needs something done to it. However, the executive director of the nonprofit's husband owns that property, or cousin. Then you have to disclose that and how decisions are being made and how you're protecting to make sure it's all fair and above board and nobody's getting kickbacks and, all that kind of thing. Could also be if you're going to construct a building and someone in your family works for that construction company. You can make a statement such as, although our project director's husband works for this company, he has no, he's not involved in making bids, or she's not involved in the selection process, whatever. You would come up with how you protect everybody involved. It's best to disclose it than get caught with it later. But most of the time, the only time it gets really tricky is in really rural areas, like where I live. Our mayor is also the Economic Development Authority director, and his dad's involved with the local college, and everybody's related to everybody. So you have, sometimes you just have to spell it out and say, okay, these are the conflicts that could exist. These are the steps we're going to take to make sure that it's all fair. And then these are other documents that we talked about, some of them, the lobbying. If you have an audit, if you have more than 500,000 in federal dollars, then you may have an audit document or a 990 that you have to produce, and they'll ask for that. This one does ask for overlap or duplication of effort statements, and that can be just a one-page statement of how the funding that you get through this program will not overlap or duplicate other things that you're doing. That doesn't mean it can't work side by side with what you're already doing. It means that you're not going to take this new money, shift over the old money, and send it to something else that's not allowable. Or you're not going to pay for this widget twice with two different funding sources, or pay this staff person twice for doing the same work. So what often happens is you talk about, we're going to supplement what's already there and expand, or we're going to add additional staff member, or we're going to add additional months that we're able to do something. It can be the exact same work, just a matter of how you're not going to use the same dollars from two different sources to pay for the same thing. Duplication is also if there's 6 organizations in your community that are doing the same type of work. It's in everybody's best interest to have some kind of agreement on how you're going to work together, and that you're not just recreating something that already exists. That is where you would explain that. Okay. And then it goes into the guidelines about having to have the UEI. We've already been over that. It tells you how to apply for SAM. Hopefully everybody will have that done before it's time for the grant to come out. It looks like the last 2 years, this guidance has come out in July. So I would start looking for regulations to hit maybe late June, early July. Keep an eye out for it on Grants.gov. You could set up a subscription to it and see if new notices are dropped. It'll let you know. The due date last year was in September, and then it got pushed back to October, so I would assume about the same. It looks like about 60 days after they released the guidelines, they want to see the proposal. You could use these guidelines and go ahead and start working, and then just when the new guidelines come out, go through and adjust and adjust anything that may be different or changed. We do that all the time. Intergovernmental review, that is a process through which you notify the state that you are applying for grants to the federal organization. Not all grants are required to do that, and there is a single point of contact. If you click that link, it'll tell you who you need to contact at the state level to ask if this one is is selected for review. If it is, you just basically, there's a portal online, you go in and you attach a copy of your abstract and answer a few questions, and that's all you have to do. Here at the bottom of page 11, it goes through funding restrictions, things that they won't pay for. I'm not going to read all that to you, but you can see it. Then at the bottom of page 13, it's kind of starting that checklist we talked about. What forms need to be filled out? What's the application format? For this one, you have to use a 12-point font with a 1-inch margin all the way around. I don't know if it says if it's double spaced or single spaced. If it doesn't say, you can choose. The whole thing, everything that you put together and submit cannot exceed 30 pages. That doesn't include the required forms in Grants.gov, your budget narrative, or any resumes that you attach for your people. But the technical proposal piece can only be 15 pages. Those are important. I've been on review panels and been told that, once you get to page 15, stop reading. Don't read any farther. Or if it's more than 30 pages, the agency won't make copies to send out to everybody, just the pages that it is, up to page 30. So it's important to give them what they're asking for, but not too much. I think of grant writing like doing a recipe. The recipe gives you instructions and says, you need a half a cup of this and a quarter cup of that. But if a recipe asks for a pinch of salt, adding a cup to it does not make it taste better, right? So I wouldn't do that. Just answer the questions they ask for, keep it short, simple, direct, move on to the next one. If they ask for your agency history, they don't want to know about when, the earth cooled and the dinosaurs were here, and, they don't want all that. They just want to know more about, how long's your organization been in existence? What kind of services do you provide? What experiences do you have? All right, and this section is just more what size the paper should be. They go through some pretty specific details to make sure that it's fair across the board, that everybody gets the same amount of space to include their information. All right, on page 15, they talk about what's allowable and not allowable with this funding. Those are always good things to keep an eye out. It does allow for award, inspection, and administration costs directly associated with the approved project, including financial and program administration, preparing reports, traveling to the project site for monitoring, supplies and laboratory costs for water quality sampling, pre and post construction water quality, and quantity monitoring, post construction monitoring, and then it gives you some regulations where you can go look up some other things. Does not pay for liability insurance, public relations, project groundskeeping and dedication, payments to an organization or individual that owes federal government money or is in violation of federal regulations, equipment, design costs, etc. All right. And we'll take a break. Everything I've talked about so far is just the regulations that they have to put out there and what all grant guidelines generally say. They're all about the same. They just put slightly different order, but those are the general stuff you can find in the guidelines. Where you will spend the most of your time is on these next few pages. So before we get into that, I see that there's some comments in the chat. Is there anything, Jenna, that we need to go back and hit off? I see some people were taking off, had to leave.
Yeah, there were no questions. They were mostly just saying thank you. It was helpful, and one person had to go.
Okay, good deal. So any questions so far? I mean, I know I'm kind of reading to you, but this is the meat and bones of where you're going to get your information. So I'm just sharing that. This next section is where you're going to get your points in your grant proposal. This is breaking down what they're looking for. Specifically, you'll get 5 points for the needs assessment. You'll get 5 points for the methodology and work plan. 40 points for the evaluation measures. I use these words as my heading for each section of my proposal. I will say needs assessment, and then the next heading will be let's see, the extent to which the application demonstrates the problems associated and contributing factors. That's my title, problems associated and contributing factors. And then I answer it. And then the next one I will put target population or whatever. And then I answer it. As a reviewer, you're looking at grants and you might have 20 of these to read in a 10-hour period. You want to make it easy for the reviewer to see, yep, they read that, they answered that, points. Yep, they answered that, points. Oh, that's pretty close. I'll give them almost all the points. You know, that's what you want to do for the reviewer. Make it really simple and direct and answer each one of these questions. If the question doesn't apply to your project, state that it doesn't apply to this project, because you'll at least get partial points for answering it than none thinking you're avoiding it or you didn't answer it or you didn't address it. I was working on a review panel and the project was something for Runaway Youth, and it said, what will your program address teen pregnancy? Or how will your program address teen pregnancy? And if the answer was, this program will not address teen pregnancy, they got full points. If the program was, we will address teen pregnancy by doing this, they could get full points. If they didn't answer it, they lost 2 points off the proposal because they just didn't answer it. So I always recommend answering every question that they have on here or referencing each statement that they talk about. And impact and benefits are worth 35 points. Resources and capabilities are 5. So if you notice, and financial support requested is 10. If you notice in this particular project, they care less about what you're going to do because it's a cooperative agreement. They're pretty much telling you what's, you know, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to measure the impacts and these kind of things. And more about your ability to evaluate it and to the impact it's going to have. So that's where you're going to need to spend most of your time gathering your information and making your case, but still answer all the other questions. All right, and the rest of this, they go through details of how the review is going to take place, what other things they're looking for. Are there any other selection factors? When the awards come out, how do they come out? Where do they come out? What are the reporting requirements? Who do you contact if you have questions? And that's pretty much all that's in the guidelines. And all of that you can get from Grants.gov. So that's where we get started. Okay, that was kind of long-winded. We have a few minutes left just for general questions, general grant questions, general application for this program or any other program or Grants.gov. I'll just open the floor.
Once again, I know you went through it once, but what's the difference between Grants.gov and SAM.gov?
Okay, SAM.gov is the portal through which the government verifies that you are an eligible entity to receive grant funding.
Okay.
In general, and the portal through which they can make payments to you. And Grants.gov is for information about grant funding that's available and how you submit your applications into Grants.gov.
Okay, so it sounds like once you get your grant and you're off and running, then Grants.gov doesn't really enter into it. It's
Nope,
all
you don't
SAM
use it
stuff.
anymore to apply for the next grant, or if it's a multi-year grant, sometimes the following year you have to do an update.
Have to do it,
But
the
no,
rest
you
of
don't
it,
need to use it after you apply.
so the rest of it is done through SAM.gov or the
The
agency.
the agency.
Okay,
SAM you have to update once a year, and the rest of it's done through agency. Depending on the funding source and how their system's set up, some of them have their own reporting portals that you'll need to use, but they provide training for that. Others, it's just you mail in reports and or email them, and that's all you have to do.
the money comes, the grantee's money comes from SAM.gov.
In most cases, and so I it's a federal government. I can't say blanket everything.
Right.
In most cases, it does come
Okay.
through SAM.gov or an affiliated system that ties into it.
Okay.
And then, yeah, the next you'll reapply for new money.
Okay.
But when you get a grant, they will go through all the regulations with you, or they'll give you all the information. And again, like I say, just read through all of it, call them, ask questions. That's why the people are there. They've heard every question before, and they're there to help. So don't be afraid to call and ask. And nobody at the agency level wants to yank money away from you.
Presentation and informative.
I'm sorry, I was talking over you. What'd you say? Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Well, I'll be here for a few minutes. If anybody has anything else they want to bring up after the room clears out a little bit, I'll stick around. If not, have a great day.
I just wanted to say thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Have a good evening.
Mhm.
Really wonderful. Thank you for that.
Okay. I know it's kind of dry, but it's the basics. So, if anybody has questions later, they can shoot them to me. We can. I don't think I included my email in there, but you have it.
Mhm.